Welcome to the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast, presented to you by HETRA University. If you've landed here, you're probably passionate about how horses help people. Whether you're an instructor, therapist, in the business, or have experienced equine assisted services yourself, we're glad you're here. Join us as we talk about the benefits, the science, to-dos, how-tos, and all of the reasons why what we do is so much more than just a pony ride. And now, from the HETRA campus in Gretna, Nebraska, here's your host, occupational therapist Katie King.
Hey gang, welcome back to your favorite Equine Assisted Services podcast. I'm your host, Katie King, and today I sat down with Kelli Hatzenbuehler. She is HETRA's mental health therapist. Kelli is such an awesome person. Honestly, she is super down to earth and really easy to talk to, which I'm sure is what makes her such a good therapist in the first place. But Kelli's also a combat veteran of the Army National Guard, and she serves as the rank of First Sergeant currently. She has done a lot of work with risk prevention and suicide prevention within the National Guard, and she really has a special place in her heart for our veterans. I'm sure we'll have her on again at some point to talk more in depth about our veteran programming, because we do a lot and she does a great job with it. But today we had an awesome conversation about how important mental health is and why horses are so good for work in mental health. She dropped a bunch of interesting knowledge on me today, and meanwhile, I added something about zebras. I don't know, you'll have to listen to it to find out, but she and I had a great time, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Kelli. We're so excited to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I have definitely a face for radio, so I'm excited to be here.
Great. We are excited to talk about mental health with you today. So tell me, let's get started with, why are horses so good for mental health? Why are they so good for the human soul?
So let's even backtrack and just talk about what mental health is.
Yeah.
Okay. So mental health can mean numerous different things to numerous different people. It can be as much as receiving some in-depth inpatient treatment. And it can mean, getting out and getting some fresh air and some vitamin D for the sun. So mental health is a huge topic, overarching topic to talk about. But because it is so big and because it is so different to so many different people, when you bring in horses into the mix, there's just so many angles towards that. So if we talk about just being mentally well, we need to really bring back the whole person. And I think when medicine started really advancing and we got broken up into little pieces, right? Which is great, because now I can go to a foot doctor and he specializes in feet and he can fix my foot. I can go to a hand doctor and he specializes in hands and he can fix my hand. And we did the same thing kind of for mental health, but we have to rein in, there's a lot going on and we're one whole person. Mm-hmm. So what does that exactly look like? One thing I like to talk about with being mentally well is what are you doing physically? Are you getting enough sleep? Is your blood sugar low because your diet is kind of goofy or you haven't eaten? My youngest is 4, and when he starts acting up, that's the first thing that I go to is, when's the last time he ate? Because this temper tantrum might not be relevant because his blood sugar is really low and we just need to get him a ham and cheese sandwich.
I think that's interesting how kids reflect so much, so genuinely as an adult, right? So it's like, the first thing you think about when kids have a tantrum is well, they didn't get a nap today,
Mm-hmm.
And it's when adults are having a bad day, think about, did you sleep good last night? Did you eat today? It's the same thing for adults as it is kids.
It is absolutely the same thing. So the whole person, what's going on physically, and is that, affecting the mental aspect of it? And horses can help figure that out because they're very honest with us. They don't lie. Mm-hmm. People can lie and say, you're completely healthy and everything's is perfect with you. But horses can see past that and they tell us the truth. Mm-hmm. They can see our internal energy, whereas as humans don't have that capability because they're just such amazing creatures that have that sense that can dig deep down into our soul. So there's that. That's why horses are great for our mental health, as well as, just regulating those internal feelings. High stress or high energy, we think we can hide that with our outward appearance and our outward talk. And horses, again, they kind of read through that. So we can do some deeper dive with them.
I was just talking with our horse manager this morning about round penning. If you don't know what that is, we'll probably cover that in a future podcast topic, but working with horses in general in a more free environment where they're not on a lead rope or anything like that. And she's worked with horses her entire life. And she says even sometimes when she steps into the round pen, immediately she might think, well, it's fine. How many times people do we say, I'm fine, it's fine, I'm fine.
I'm fine never means I'm fine.
Right. Yeah. So, you might think you're fine or you're just there, just at work, you're doing whatever. And she steps into the round pen and immediately that horse is a different horse, or it's more difficult for them to work together because that horse sees you're not fine, even though you project that maybe to the world.
Right.
It's really interesting.
Right. And they will mirror that. Mm-hmm. So if I go work with a horse and I've got some internal distress, something is really on my mind. I'm preoccupied. Maybe my undertones are a little aggressive. My horse is going to tell me that by mirroring that same behavior. So as a therapist, I can look at the horse's behavior and tell you what's going on with the person, which is just an interesting perspective for a therapist as well.
Yeah. And I see that when I ride all the time too. I ride pretty frequently. And if my head's not in it, neither is my horse's. They're like, okay, if you're not, I'm not. Or, it's very much a partnership that it mirrors itself, like you said, really well. So I see it when I ride. Shelby sees it when she round pens. What types of activities do you do to, help your patients and your participants see that? So
we do quite a few different activities, but a common one we do is just grooming, just hands-on with the horse. So that horse can really feel that participant's heartbeat and feel where that energy is at. If there's some anxieties going on or some sadness going on, you'll definitely see that in the horse's reaction. Like if you're anxious about something, that horse is going to feel it and it's going to wonder, should I be anxious about something too? So you're going to have to either calm those anxious feelings down, or we're going to have to figure out a way on a workaround, because that horse is going to feel that. So grooming is a great opportunity to just practice some mindfulness, take some deep breaths. It's really therapeutic in the constant motions of the brush strokes. They're really repetitive. And then I often say that horse knows. So if I see a horse take a deep breath, the participant will then take a deep breath as well, as almost to say, just calm down, just slow your heart rate down. You're not going to hurt me. I'm not going to hurt you. We're going to work through this together.
Right. And I think we had shared something on our social media. I was going to try and find it quick, but I couldn't. There's something about the heartbeats. Do you recall this?
Right.
Do you remember that? What
right. A horse can regulate its heartbeat to match your heartbeat. Something with a fight or flight animal that is that sensitive to its surroundings. So it's not going to fight a whole lot because it doesn't have the right tools to win in a fight, So it is constantly looking either for a way out or for what's my exit strategy if I come into trouble. And they're always on high alert. So that trust is super important to build with that horse so it can calm down as well. If you can lower your heartbeat and match it to the horse's, you guys can work as a team and both calm each other down.
And I think that comes partially too because horses are a herd animal, right? So they're always looking to their leader of their herd, whether it be a mare or a male, to tell them what to do. And I think that even probably them, I'm assuming that they can feel that energy, maybe even their heartbeats. And if their lead if their boss mare or whoever it is starts to increase their heartbeat and their energy increases, then that means, we need to be on alert too.
Sure.
And so it translates, I think, really well for us to work with them as partners, like herd mates almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what makes horses amazing to work with certain participants, especially maybe somebody that's dealt with trauma or PTSD. I'm a combat war vet, and I know that when you come home from a wartime situation, you have accustomed yourself to be on high alert at all times.
Yeah.
And your body doesn't know how to just calm down and settle your brain. You're constant looking for, again, like a horse, for your way out. You often hear about combat vets can't handle crowded rooms or being in the center, their back's against the wall. They know where their exits are. They have an exit strategy if, bad things happen. And that's very, very similar to a horse.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really never thought about that. And that can be why horses are so easy for them to relate to, maybe.
Absolutely.
That energy.
Absolutely.
You feel that together. It's like, it goes understood. Because horses can't tell you. And sometimes people who have experienced trauma, they can't tell you that either. So it's
something I think that's ingrained then deep down inside where you don't see it and maybe don't feel it on a day-to-day basis. I know just a situation I had, this is years ago, after my last deployment. I come home and I was driving the kids home from school, and it was out on a county road by where I lived. I drove that county road all the time. And out of the corner of my eye, there was a fence post that was kind of leaning towards the side. And for whatever reason, I stopped the van and I had a panic attack because that fence post looked very similar to a rocket rail that I had studied on a daily in Iraq for a year. And so I think that, and afterward, I kind of laughed about it. Like, that's ridiculous. I'm in, Nebraska of all places. But similar with a horse, you can have a very well-trained horse that is desensitized to many things. And one noise or one sound might trigger that horse to be on high alert because that's ingrained in them. That's deep down in their DNA now. And so that comes out and you're like, wow, that's surprising that would happen. Well, it was surprising that a fence post looked like a rocket rail in Nebraska to me. But, that's just kind of the way it is. So we have to learn how to work around that.
Yeah, and work through it.
And
that's what's so important in horses and people. When you have those situations like that, those, triggers, I guess, if you will, that brings your brain back to that moment and you feel those feelings so very real. How do you work through that with a horse? We might do some desensitization to it. And I imagine it's, similar in humans, right?
Right. So you can work through those situations in a couple different ways. One of the ways is like a Gestalt type theory where you can reenact and relive so that you can kind of rewire the brain to know that it's not in danger, and that you're safe. And those thoughts of constantly being in danger or having night terrors or whatever, you kind of reenact those situations in a safe environment. But you can also just provide the arena like you would at a therapy office and do talk therapy or play therapy. And it's just, again, a safe environment where you can open up. There's just something about horses or animals in general that allow people to feel safe and open up about things.
Isn't that amazing?
That they wouldn't normally.
I have a therapy dog. So before I came to HETRA and worked with horses full time, I trained my dog. We did a lot of like anxiety work with kids. And I worked in a school for kids who had difficulty being in a regular classroom because they had lots of different behaviors or, adaptive strategies they would use to get out of work. And so we worked in the school and just talked to kids. And it's so much different. I would say almost 1,000% different if I sat in a room with a student and said, how are you feeling today? Than if Benelli laid in between us and as, they're kind of petting him, I said, how are you feeling today? or tell Benelli how you feel, or,
Right.
Benelli's having a good day. What do you think? And using that like a buffer almost. And kids would just open up, just almost completely night and day difference.
We see the same thing on the physical aspect. If you put somebody on a horse, their brain is thinking about, how do I stay on this horse? And you can relate in a deeper level, like through a couple levels, and get them to talk or say or do things, which normally if it was just one-on-one, they wouldn't, because maybe you're dealing with somebody ADHD and they're preoccupied with staying on the horse, so you can get them to do something else, at the same time. And I think the same goes for the therapy. If I was sitting at a desk and it's a little more sterile environment, maybe, or it feels like therapy, then you have just an automatic wall built up. But if we can go outside and we're listening to birds and we're smelling freshly cut grass and we're, all of that stuff is keeping our brain preoccupied, so that maybe I can get in there and dig through a couple different layers and get them to open up. So it's quite awesome.
Yeah.
And I really am lucky and happy that I ended up here.
Very good. I can't agree with you more on that once your participant is on the horse, because as a therapist, I'm an occupational therapist. So for me, I'm working on skills that, much like mental health skills, that it's hard, for your participants to talk about those things. And it's hard for my participants to do some of those things physically, like maybe use their pincher fingers, or, sit up tall, or, do some things like that. It's really hard. And if we were just sitting in the clinic, on a therapy ball, and I said, use your muscles to sit up tall, I'd be like, why? I don't want to do that. But if they're not, they're thinking about it more. Whereas when they're on the horse, it's like, oh, okay. And they're more willing and more, I think, distracted to do some of those difficult skills.
Right. So another example is horses can teach us a lot about healthy boundaries without talking even about healthy boundaries, right? So we can do a leading exercise through an obstacle course and talk about different boundaries of the horses and relay that to our own boundaries, or even learning how to lead a horse. There's people that like to lead a horse right up next to the horse. And maybe there's certain horses that are like, hey, I need about 2 feet. Can you back up? That horse is going to let you know, because it's going to act irritated, or it's not going to do exactly what you want it to.
It's not going to sugarcoat it, much like humans do sometimes.
Right. Like I said, they don't lie to us. So we can talk about boundaries, or, some people just have a smaller bubble or a larger bubble. So we can talk about what that looks like after you leave the arena to others. Are you portraying just an atmosphere that makes people uncomfortable because your bubble is so large or so small, depending on what's, relevant to your customs and whatnot?
I'm a small bubble person for sure.
Are you? I like my space.
That's why we're across the table from each other. No. But yes, I can relate to that. That sometimes you have to go into every situation not knowing what other people's bubbles are. And I think as humans, we don't think about that very often when relating to other humans. But when you bring a person in who's never worked with a horse before, maybe, and they go to lead that horse, you're going to be much more aware or interested, maybe more attuned to what that horse wants. Like, I'm not gonna, as a small bubble person, I wouldn't walk right up to a horse that I've never met before in my life and snuggle right up on him, even though that's my custom to do. But I will say, sometimes I do that to people I don't know in the grocery store. I'm like, oh, excuse me, I'm just gonna reach for this salsa right through your armpit. And it doesn't bother me, but it's different with the horses than it is humans. And I could see that being a good teaching moment.
Absolutely. And every horse is different with their bubbles as well. I know I did a vacation. Actually, I think I was TDI for the military, but I was out on the coast. And in bigger cities, your bubble's smaller because there's more people, right? They're used to subways and buses and mass transit. And just, we were out on a street corner. And I remember me and my girlfriend, we were going to a restaurant, I think, to grab dinner after being in class all day. And these guys came walking up right behind us, and it was a stoplight. We were waiting to cross, but I just remember like getting really tense because they were loud, and they came up right behind us, and they did very quickly and very aggressively. And I remember like clutching my wallet and like, what's going on? Because in the Midwest, we don't necessarily have that, and the bubbles are a little bit bigger. But yeah, I remember like cognizantly thinking, wow, that I had nothing to probably worry about, but it just felt uncomfortable. So like you're saying, you meet a new horse and you walk up to that horse, to its face, aggressively, with purpose. And that horse is going to be like, what is going on? And walls are going to go up and, high alert, because we have to respect that. So it's different. And then you bring in culture and customs, and that plays a role as well. So taking all of that into consideration and just having a discussion of what healthy boundaries looks like, to keep you safe, but also to keep you healthy, is really important. And I think the horses do a great job at teaching us that.
This episode is sponsored by Equiforce. Equiforce is a database that allows you to track every facet of your organization, from horse, donor, and volunteer management to scheduling, grant tracking, incident reports, and tracking participant progress too. This is not a one-size-fits-all setup. Instead, Equiforce personally works with you to learn how your facility functions and takes note of your specific terminology so that they can create a unique system to match the needs of your organization. And of course, Equiforce provides an ongoing training and support so that your database can grow with you. Visit them at www.equiforce.com. That's EQUI-FORCE.com. I think we're fortunate at HETRA too to have such a big, diverse herd. We have lots of different horses with lots of different personalities. Do you ever use those personalities to your benefit, sort of as a therapeutic tool? Like you did a really good job with this horse, but now this one is completely different, or, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Just like with riding, you have kind of beginner level, really slow and kind of, I call them Eeyore horses, like, the same thing with different activities in the mental health arena. So if I'm working with somebody that has a great fear and anxiety issues, not just with horses, but in life in general, I'm probably not going to give them a real high anxious horse and say, okay, let's learn together. You're probably going to start with one of the Eeyore horses, right. Somebody just cool, calm, collected, things don't really rile their feathers, and work through. That being said, some of the folks really need challenges. And so we can provide them different horses with different opportunities to really challenge them and push through things. We do long line lunging, and some of our horses are really receptive to energy, and they will really respect like your energy and your arm movements and whatever. And then some you have to really work towards. Right. And so depending on where that participant is at, I'm not going to challenge somebody so hard that they end up quitting, but you have to have a little bit of challenge in there as well. So we will definitely try to fit the right horse for the activity for the participant.
Very good. I think too, I've used this conversation about energy with some of my therapy participants. And it can be sort of abstract to think about, like, what is my energy? Even when you're teaching other people to work with horses for the first time and you say, well, bring down your energy. Well, what does that mean? And I think that provides a really good time for that, like, introspective reflection, almost like meditation, like slow everything down that, don't think about your grocery list. Don't think about, be really present in this moment and think about, like, what does, like, if you could imagine your energy being like a ball inside of you, what does that feel like? Where do you feel it? What does it look like? That kind of thing.
Right. And I love the here and now. That's something that we studied a lot through school. I've studied a lot after school. The here and now is your mindfulness. If people are struggling with anxieties, they're worried about future. If people are struggling with depression and sadness, they're stressing about past. So taking the future self and the past self and bringing them to here and now. Where are we at right now? And you can do that with mindfulness. We do that in the arena with horses. You don't need any tools. And you just stand with the horse, you ground your feet, you take a couple deep breaths, and you get in touch with your senses. So what am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I smelling? Not necessarily taste unless you're in a pretty dusty area, and then you can really taste. But what are my senses feeling right now? And you will see that those anxieties start to dwindle. And that worry about past stuff that you can't fix starts to dwindle because you're only concentrating on what's going on right here.
I haven't had the pleasure of seeing one of your sessions in person where you're doing that, but can you see a difference in the horse? Like once, people say like you start and you're like, okay, now only think about this. And then, because I do yoga, so, and you lay down for Shavasana and you're like, okay, only think about my thoughts. What are my thoughts? And you start to drift. And then can you see a difference in the horse when they truly start to be present?
Absolutely. So you will see the horse's neck drop, their head drop. They will take deep breaths when they need to, which will prompt you to do the same. You can just see the energy fall because they feel safe. I've done it a few times with an individual on one side of the horse, but it's really fun when they have an individual on either side of the horse, because they just feel really relaxed. And you'll see that one foot cock up and maybe even two if they can get a back, like a good stance. They'll get a front one and a back one. And you can just tell that horse is not trying to go anywhere anytime soon, which is super fun to see that dynamic. And that energy, kind of just settle down,
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I read a book one time that was, why zebras don't have ulcers, I think, or something like that. I don't know.
Sounds interesting.
I'll have to look at it. Don't take my word for that. I can't remember if that was the exact title, but it talked a lot about how zebras, but horses are a very here and now animal. Like they don't care what happened 5 minutes ago. They don't care what's going to happen in 5 minutes. They're thinking about right now, like, is there a predator? If there is, I will respond to that. And then immediately after that threat is gone,
they're back to zero.
We're back to zero. And as humans, we can't do that.
We cannot.
It's something is threatening to us. I'm going to think about it for weeks, months, depending on, if it's trauma, years, and that's what causes that anxiety and other health complications associated with it.
Well, I am very jealous of a zebra because how awesome would that be? And I know that males are different than females. And the female brain might think and stir and stew over that even a longer. I know that's a constant battle in my house. I'm like, how does my husband forget about that fight we had 3.5 months ago when I'm still thinking about it all the time, But that's the difference between male and female brain and our genetic makeup. So I would say, yeah, my husband's more like a zebra, and I'm aspiring to be more like a zebra.
Aspiring to be a zebra. I like that. So tell me a little bit about the types of participants, but do you have a specialty or an area that you specifically like to work in? I know you've talked some about PTSD and trauma, and being a vet yourself, you probably have an affinity. You can relate to that really well. Is there something that you specifically enjoy working with?
Well, I enjoy working with people. So it doesn't necessarily matter. When I came to HETRA, I worked with adults with developmental disabilities, and I had no idea that would be such an amazing clientele to work with. And I had so much fun learning about every single person that came in here and their different abilities and the success that we had with the horses. I know some of the success stories that I talk about was having somebody that I was told was nonverbal, and after a 12-week session of working with the horses could say, a handful of words. And somebody that didn't understand rules and regulations, and by the end of a 12-week session, again, having those messages solidified by the horses would give me a list of 5 rules that they follow, or they went home and developed a safety plan if there was a fire, just, life type skills.
What do you think it is about horses that that does that? Is it a motivation thing? Is it a reinforcement? Because I have therapy students like that all the time. Like they come and they may have elopement issues at school where they just run into maybe the parking lot without even looking, you know, or that kind of thing. And we bring them into the barn, and like suddenly that following the rules and regulating my body so that I can pay attention to follow rules is so much easier.
Right.
I don't know
Well,
what it is.
we start with rules here.
Mhm.
You know, in order to ride the horses, there's rules. You have to come and check in at the check-in counter. You have to have your helmet. You have to walk in the hallways. So they're used to and accustomed to rules from the very first day.
Yeah.
We don't have to develop new rules each and every time they come. So they're used to the rules from the get-go. And there's a reward at the end. They get to play with 2,000-pound creatures.
Right.
So they either get to ride or groom or do something with the horses. There's a reward for following those rules. With the participants that I used to work with, they were rewarded in the classroom. We would learn a skill, and then we would go solidify that skill in the arena. So that was their reward. And we did a lot of positive reinforcement. But the horse was the majority of the positive reinforcement for them.
Yeah, it did the work for us.
It did.
I know working in the clinic, it was so hard to find like motivators and that kind of thing. What motivates this participant to want to do better, and does the heavy lifting in terms of motivators.
That's a great way of looking at it. Sure. So I like working with kids and adults that have fears. I like getting through past those fears. A couple of my recent participants have been scared of horses. So that's been fun, you know, slowly desensitizing them to the horse. And ultimately my goal is to get them on a horse. So when that comes to fruition, that's sure fun to watch.
And I think the important thing about that is in occupational therapy, we're always working on what's functional for you, like what skills can we build so that your life is easier. And sometimes I think it's easy to look at things like hippotherapy or working with horses in the way that we do and say, well, how is that functional? Like, great, your student is able to get on a horse. You know, what goal is that meeting for that person? And it's important to look beyond, you know, the fact that it's a horse, but that you're helping that participant conquer fears in general, you know, and like, how is that going to translate for the rest of their life, that they got to practice that with you, with your guidance, and then, you know, translate to other areas of their life.
Absolutely. And that just circled right back to becoming the whole person again. So when somebody that's doing occupational or physical therapy with the participant, and your goal is to have them use their hands and eyes and coordinate and put a ball through a hoop, and you understand that before that even happened, my goal was to get them on a horse. And we've accomplished quite a bit with that participant.
Yeah. And that reminded me of, I had a participant once that everyone was like, well, why are you teaching that person to use reins? And, you know, why is that important? How is that going to translate to the rest of their life? And then, you know, that directionality and using reins for coordination for their hands. And then they got a power wheelchair, and using the toggle on their power wheelchair was so much easier because they understood that directionality. And we worked on that hand coordination for so long. And we might say that's because of what we did in therapy with our horses or whatever. But I truly believe that the skills we work on in the arena translate so well to other areas of life.
Yeah, absolutely. You're working on confidence and emotional awareness. So when to cheer for yourself if you did a good thing, problem solving, social skills, trust, emotional awareness, independence, impulse control, just all of those things you're working on, and you don't know that you're actually working on it. And that's why we have such great success, I think, in the arena, is because you don't know that you're in therapy. Right. You don't even realize that you're gaining all of this skill and knowledge.
It is not just a pony ride. I had to say it. I'm sorry. It was there. I had to take it. But you're right. There's so much more going on, but the fact that our participants, adults, young and old, everybody, is having a really good time helps those skills translate even better.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we're getting close on time, Kelli. Is there anything that you want our listeners to know, things that are important to you?
Sure. I think after having, Josh calls it a dumpster fire year, and I couldn't agree more. Dumpster fire 2020. After having a year like 2020, we're only going to see an increase in needs for the mental health arena. It's been a tough year for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. But one of those main reasons is just anxiety about, again, future self, not knowing with the government, not knowing with the COVID, not knowing about any of this stuff. We're just going to see an uptake or an increase in participants needed for the mental health arena in those aspects. So I just think it's such an important job. We're going to have to be creative on how we look at a lot of this stuff. I know, have you lived through a global pandemic before?
No.
I know, me neither. Me neither. So we're just going to have to be creative on how we work through these anxieties. And this might happen again, or this may extend way into this next year. And there's just a lot of unknowns. So I think, unfortunately, I have job security, but we're just going to have to keep plugging away.
Yeah, and that what more creativity could you have in taking care of your mental health than coming to hang out with some ponies, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Okay, the last question everybody always gets, and I forgot to prompt you with this. So, audience, you are getting the real thought process here.
I'm nervous.
You can choose. Okay. Either what is your spirit animal and why? Or if you've ever had a heart horse, this is kind of a horsey podcast, so I like to talk about heart horses if you've had the pleasure of having one.
Okay, so I currently have a heart horse.
You do?
Her name is Dee. She's a paint. I've had her for about 8.5 years. She was given to me by somebody that was retiring and moving off the farm. She came with her best friend. He was a little bit older. His name was Sonny. Sonny, I had to put down a couple years ago. His health really started to decline, and I didn't think he was going to make it through a harsh winter. And I tried to do the most humane thing possible, and it broke my heart in a million pieces. If anybody has ever had to put an animal down, any animal, like that is just, oh my gosh, so hard. And Sonny did a great job while he was with us. He taught all my kids how to ride because he was just slow and lazy and just walked around and super safe. But Dee, she was my go-to horse, and now she's getting old. And she's what I call, or everybody calls, a hard keeper. A very expensive money machine. You know, I can't even tell you how much senior feed into this horse because her teeth are bad and she's super skinny. And although I made the decision with Sonny, I just can't. I can't with poor Dee. I go out and feed her every morning and every night, and she's blanketed. And I know that's controversy, but she's just my baby. She is my heart horse. And I don't know what I'm going to do without her someday. I know they don't live forever. And that is truly unfortunate that they can't, live to be 100 like a person. But I know we're probably coming close to her end of days, and just want to spend as much time with her and love on her. But yeah, she just looks tired. But
how wonderful it is that she gets to spend those last few years being mega loved by you. And I think what always helps me is horses are here for a shorter period than humans are. And that's because they love twice as much, twice as large as humans do. So they don't have to be here forever because they love so well while they're here for the short amount of time.
Yes, just don't tell my husband how much I spend on feeding this horse.
Your secret is safe with me.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelli. I'll leave your information in our show notes below. Check us out if you're interested in services, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.
This podcast is presented by HETRA University, an educational arm of the Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy. HETRA University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to our participants and the equine-assisted services community. Craving more content like this? We invite you to check out our series of webinars and much, much more over at hetrauniversity.org. If you'd like to help us work toward our mission, you can make a donation by clicking on the link in the show notes below or visit us at hetra.org. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, my biggest thanks to you all for helping HETRA change lives one stride at a time.